Hello.
Hi, Isabel. How are you? It's your old mate David Ferrier.
I remember you.
So, today's episode is about someone who buys their first home in America and
Uh,
everything seems perfect until they encounter like a horrible problem that they never saw coming.
okay.
I'm wondering if you've ever moved into a house and there was a big problem that you never saw coming and you can't say living with me.
That was the obvious answer. I was living in a dream situation, which is that I was flatting with a whole bunch of really good friends of mine.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, maybe I had moved out by this stage and I came back and one of my friends was away, so I stayed in their bed. And as I was falling asleep, you know how sometimes when you're falling asleep in a new bed, you're sort of sensitive to the feeling of the bed.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I was like, I feel like there's something scratchy or like, it's like this
Oh.
like a hair, like moving on my skin.
Hmm.
And so I turned the light on and there were all these like tiny maggots like crawling over the bed.
Oh. God.
And I jumped out of bed. It was just the most awful discovery. But I am to this day, I'm so confused if that was a new development or if that was like always like that in that bed. I had to put my glasses on because I have such bad eyesight.
Hmm.
But it was like swimming in them. Like
Oh,
they were like 30 from what I could see through my like through one perspective.
horrible.
But I don't know that we ever solved the mystery of it.
I'm David Farrier, a New Zealander accidentally marooned in America, and I want to figure out what makes this country tick. Now, occasionally on the show, we go down some very specific rabbit holes that we stumble across here in America. Those rabbit holes usually lead to stories that say something about this country, what it's like to live here, how it functions, and the strange twists and turns that can happen along the way. Now, a big part of the American dream, and it's not that different to the New Zealand dream, is to own your own home. I'm not quite sure how it happens, but at some point you're sort of indoctrinated with this idea that the main goal in life, besides getting married and breeding, is to own your own home. This isn't the case everywhere. If you live in Switzerland, Germany, or South Korea, chances are home ownership isn't quite so high on your list of priorities. Plenty of people happily rent for life. But here in America, the dream is to buy a home. But what happens if you buy that home only to discover that home comes with a problem? You can't see the problem because it's invisible. You can't touch the problem because it's untouchable. But it's there and it's constant. It's a sound and it won't go away. And it's slowly driving you crazy. This is the Mysterious Sound episode.
Flightless, flightless, flightless bird touchdown in America. I'm a flightless bird touchdown in America.
Rob, it's a mysterious sound. It's a mysterious episode. Are you intrigued? I really wanted to like sell the mystery, you know?
Yeah, I'm very intrigued. Have you had a place you moved into with a terrible situation after you got in?
I haven't. Like I'm obsessed with the idea of you get your dream place and everything's okay and then something's off, which is this whole episode. I have a friend, and that's not what this episode is about, but I had a friend who moved into a house in somewhere in California.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been there. And they'd moved in, dream place. They're sitting on the couch. They hear a knock on the back door. They go to the back door and there's no one there. And then they sit back down on the couch. And then there's a knock on like the front door. And they
Mm-hmm.
go there, they open it. There's no one there. They're like, what's going on? Woodpeckers had chosen their house to store all of their nuts in. And so this house, like the wood it was made of, was suddenly attractive to them.
They store their nuts in?
You know how woodpeckers get, are they seeds or nuts? You know, woodpeckers Do you know what was a woodpeckers?
Yeah, I know what a woodpecker is.
They make holes. And
yeah, I didn't realize they were storing.
They chuck shit in there.
Got it.
If you're walking around, this is like a very niche thing. If you're walking around Griffith Park, they have these like street signs and they have holes in them. And if you look in there, it's full of nuts. It's the woodpeckers. That's lazy. They can't be bothered like making their own hole. So they put them in an artificial hole and they fill these poles up with fucking nuts. Anyway, my point is this dream home they suddenly discovered was like a storage shed for the local woodpeckers. You can't kill woodpeckers. There are a lot of them. And I've got this video of someone coming around and removing like the internal wall.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a tidal wave of nuts. Their whole house full of nuts. That's an example of like, I love these stories of like, you've got your dream place. There's a problem you never thought of.
I just imagine they do the thing where you like, they got a snake to scare off the
get
woodpeckers,
like a new thing
but
in.
then you need something to scare off the snakes, and then they end up with lions.
Suddenly
in
you've got
their
like
yard.
a house full of like elephants and
Yeah.
tigers.
Is that what they did to get rid of the woodpeckers?
No, they basically, I understand they had to basically, I think, I'm not a builder, reclad the outside of the house. So they had to basically like change what the outside
The
was.
material.
So the woodpeckers were like deterred. But it's just such a funny problem to have. I had another friend's place that got overtaken by like a weird fungus that was like growing in the walls.
These are all New Zealand problems?
These are all American problems.
Oh,
Since I
American.
got here, they're all Americans. We don't even have woodpeckers.
We had one place in Chicago,
Mm.
not overrun by fungi or animals,
Yeah.
but we had moved into a new apartment in Chicago, and it was like they had just remodeled all these apartments. I don't even think it was ready when we moved in. We had to like live in the construction for a month.
That's fun.
And then like a month or two into living there, all of the doors in the like neighborhood nearby, the alderman had posted notices that there was a gang turf war going on.
Oh, yeah, this is my favorite kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not turf war, but like the idea of this problem you never expect.
Yeah, and to like report if you saw graffiti because it was them claiming their turf.
You don't want to be a snitch, though. You don't want to be snitching on.
But there was then a night we went out to see a movie, came home late, and it's all street parking there. I remember seeing these like 3 dudes walking through the neighborhood, and we like drove by them looking for a parking spot, found parking, go up in our apartment, and we're 3rd floor right by a street light on the corner. And I look out the window and I see the 3 guys at the light, and they're flashing gang signs at every car that's driving by.
This feels like an urban myth
No,
that I've walked into.
This is real.
Okay.
There were 2 or 3 people that apparently either did not flash the right sign back or anything, and they like tried to pull them out of the car, and they're just speeding away. I called the police, and
terrifying.
took like 40 minutes for them to come as they're like attacking people at this light.
So you're just watching this from the window.
Yeah. Wasn't much I could do at like 2 a.m. Like I can't sleep because I could hear them like yelling from outside the window.
Insane. That's a good one. And by good one, I mean bad one. Rosabelle had maggots in the bed. I love that she also thought that maybe that was just like the permanent state of the bed, that she's still musing on whether it was like a one-off.
Was she like storing salami or something?
I don't know. It was like she was staying in her friend's, like she'd moved out of that house. She'd gone back to visit, was staying in like an empty room, like the bed there. There must have been like a bit of meat or like burger or something in there. So foul. I don't know. I've never woken up with anything like, I've never had a house disaster. Maybe that's why I'm fascinated by them. Like I've had good luck.
I mean, for now, you have a ghost.
Actually, I have a ghost.
Is it still waking you up?
He's still there. Every 3 a.m. I swear to God, 3 a.m. I'm awake. I'm so used to it now. I'm like, I'm just going to wake up at 3. I say, hello. I roll over. I go back to sleep.
I don't know if I believe that this is happening
every night. Look at the state of me. Look how unkempt I am. It's the ghost.
Will you send me a text when you wake up at 3 a.m.?
I absolutely will.
All right.
I'll prove it.
Yeah, I need you to prove it.
Every morning at 3 a.m. A little bit of housekeeping, just quickly. The YouTube channel is going well. People seem to like the video, which is nice. So if you're not watching us and you want to have a look at our faces, it's at Flightless Bird Podcast on YouTube. Rob, you are getting a lot of compliments. People are using words like smoke show, and they're using the eggplant emoji and the squirt.
No, it's not.
No, they are. I'm sorry. I'm just letting you know. As for me, people are mostly just like freaked out about the state of my hair.
Yeah.
Doc Brown.
Looking at this photo,
he's changed.
your hair is like styled so nicely in there.
It's styled. It's less. Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that was me 3 years ago in America. This is what America has done to me. And that's just what happens when you live here.
People, they mostly just seem concerned.
They seem worried.
Like, take care of your hair.
Yeah,
and
use conditioner.
Get some treatment.
Yeah.
So that you can.
I have got a new conditioner, which I'm trying because it is very. But I'm happy. Yeah, really nice feedback. So thanks for sending that in, and thanks for watching.
I did see a couple people intrigued about your love life and they wanted to hear more.
They did. Yeah, I did tease in the conversation with Hayden. They're not going to get more. No, just some, things happen in life, Maybe we'll do a spin-off show about love at some point, but this is a show about America, not my love life.
Is it resolved yet? Or are you still in
Nothing in my life is ever resolved.
Are you in romantic turmoil right now?
I'm always in romantic turmoil of some kind. Yeah. It's just the way I exist. So it's not shocking. It's just Hayden raised it that time. He's also trying to always get information out of me. I'm like, Hayden, this is private.
Do you talk to anyone about it?
I talk to Rosabelle about my love life, and I talk to
your mom.
Mummy. No,
Pamela.
No, she does not need to, Pamela does not need to know. Sometimes I talk to my therapist.
So do you have two people?
Two people, Rosabelle and my therapist. Very similar advice, actually, which shows that Rosabelle's pretty onto it, and my therapist is pretty, they're both good. Weirdly, I listen to Rosabelle more than my therapist. I get annoyed at my therapist sometimes. I'm like, don't you tell me like what you think about my life, even though that's the whole reason she's there.
Do you get that combative with your therapist?
Yeah, I probably get most combative with my therapist. I feel like maybe because I'm paying them.
You feel like you can talk to them however you want.
I don't know. It's weird. Now I'm thinking about it. It is weird. I feel like I can be very honest, and part of therapy is being, because I'm trying to learn how to communicate better. And so part of my therapy is being honest with my therapist about what I think. And so I've taken that on board. Wow. So I think it's a positive. I'm making it sound like I'm just going off at my therapist all the time.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. You're a real asshole to your therapist.
Just a real piece of shit. If you want to be an asshole to us, our email address is flightlessbirdchat@gmail.com. It's really nice hearing from everyone. And as usual, I'll read some feedback at the end of the show. Like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this. That really helps. And something I keep forgetting to mention, if we talk about a link or something in the show notes of the podcast, we put all the links and all the things we talk about. So if you're like, what was that article? Show notes, it's all in there. And finally, we won a little award. Well, it's not an award. It's a recognition, really. We got an email from Apple. I was hoping it would be giving us like a lot of laptops and stuff, but it just said Flightless Bird has been handpicked by Apple Podcasts ANZ, which is Australia, New Zealand, as one of the shows we love for 2024. Congratulations.
Wow. Yeah, that's exciting.
We don't get a prize, but they put us on, I think, some banners in the app and stuff, which is cool. So yeah, thanks, Apple. It's nice. So we were on that billboard in Melbourne from Spotify, which is cool. And now Apple is giving us a little thumbs up. So it's nice that people are into it.
I really like these institutions in New Zealand and Australia.
It's nice, right? They're on board. Yeah, it's funny. Like I've never in New Zealand or Australia been on a billboard or never like been told this is good, but they're doing that now, which is it's really kind. Now, should we get into today's mystery?
Yes.
Are you ready? A mysterious sound. It's going to get weird.
It's about 2 p.m. on a very hot LA day, and I'm in this alleyway with a guy I met on Reddit.
We've been wandering around for a while now, walking past fences and barbed wire, looking up at the backs of the buildings we're walking past. There's the back of a real estate office, a massage parlor, a liquor store.
You know, you actually mentioned something kind of interesting, because behind us is this building, and there's this little lip above the building, because it's basically just a very thin wall. In fact, it's technically fiber reinforced plastic, which they acronize to FRP. I don't know if that's the case. I would have to look on satellite to see if there's actually antennas behind there.
Can you check now? Can you have a look? Because I think this could be the building, because the music studio is one block over there. The guy I'm with, I can't use his real name because he wants to remain anonymous, but he's got a backpack full of gear over one shoulder, an open laptop in one hand, a phone in the other. He's pulling up a satellite view of the alley we're in right now, which begs the question, what are we doing in this alley and how did we get here? Let's rewind. Chapter 1. Leroy. This story starts with Leroy Clampett. He's a New Zealander who's been living in LA for about a decade now. A year ago, he found himself at an open home with his partner Taylor. Remember how I said New Zealanders and Americans share the dream of buying a house? That's how they ended up at this open home. They really wanted a place of their own.
There's a lot of people coming to look at this back house because it's quite trendy, it's mid-century looking on the inside.
Leroy found himself in the small back house, which was exactly what he'd been looking for, a separate space to convert into a music studio. Because Leroy's a music producer, writing and producing with the likes of Justin Bieber and Madison Beer. If you've listened to Sabrina Carpenter's Things I Wish You Said or Emails I Can't Send, that's Leroy at work.
It's times like these, wish I had a time machine, so
Leroy had found his perfect studio space. The decision now came down to the main house out the front.
The front house is quite scary by 99% of people's standards, but for Taylor, it was the most exciting thing because it's an old craftsman house, and instead of being renovated a billion times in the 120 years it's been around, no one had really touched it apart from like painting it white. So all of the original woodwork and stuff in there is the original floors and everything, and she was just so excited.
Because the front house was such a wreck, they managed to sneak in and buy it.
You walk in there and it's like, you can see how it's twisted and over time and sunken. Anyway, I was like, the studio house is cool enough and she loves it. And it's like a sick part of town. Like I wouldn't have dreamed of getting a place here.
Taylor had her dream renovation project, and Leroy had the back house where he could set up a permanent studio space.
It was kind of one of those life choices where it's like, if we go on this path now, that's at least a year of work, learning how to do stuff we haven't had to do, dealing with different kinds of people, not living in the house we just bought for a year. Yeah, and it was like, well, we'd already been looking for a year and hadn't won anything, so we were like, let's do it. Definitely like had some regrets at certain points in the process, but all in all, pretty happy with the choice. It's just, yeah.
There was a problem with the house they'd just sunk all their money into. They just didn't know it yet.
The studio's in the house back here, which used to be a 2-bedroom house, and I took out a wall and done a bunch of work to make it into a studio. So it was 6 months planning, executing, doing a bunch of work. It was this kind of sacred thing where it was like, when I set up my studio, I want a clean start. I don't want to set up a few things in there and try things out yet. I want to wait till I'm ready, move everything in there and put it together how I wanted. So I never tested any sound in there until we had spent all the money and done all the work.
Right now, I'm sitting with Leroy outside the studio he's talking about. He's taking me through the day he had finally finished setting the whole thing up.
Moving in was literally the day I'd been waiting for 5 years. It was like gonna be the best day of my life, like moving into this beautiful space. But it was a couple days before maybe I had set up a keyboard in there with a guitar amp, and there was this noise. I was like, oh, it's weird, must be bad power out here or something. And then I sent a video to Aaron.
Leroy's friend Aaron is sat here with us too. He's a musician and just all-around tech guru guy who'd been helping him set up.
Aaron, I think, got back and he was like, oh no. And I was like, what?
Chapter 2, A Mysterious Sound. At this stage, Aaron chimes in. That sound Leroy had heard, Aaron had heard it before.
I used to have a studio 4 or 5 years ago in this big building, and I used to have the exact same issue and also went crazy on it, setting up a full portable rig, asking the building manager to turn the power off in the building temporarily, turn the Wi-Fi off, trying to figure it out, and I never got to the end result of figuring out what it was. And I hadn't heard the sound since then. It had been like 4 or 5 years. And then Leroy sent me this recording, and it's like all these horrific memories came back, and I was like, oh no.
That noise, that sort of digital glitchy mess, it was in everything.
This invisible force. You feel helpless because we just, at that point, had no clue how to start getting around. It was just in everything. Every mic you plugged in, every instrument you plugged in, speakers, it was just on everything. Your entire, career depends on it.
Leroy started furiously plugging and unplugging each element of his studio to see if the noise would stop. He logged everything as he went, writing it down. I'm reading his list now. All things a music producer has, I guess. A TIAC A3440 tape machine, JBL monitors, Roland Juno 60 synthesizer, wooden headphone attenuators, Neumann U87 large diaphragm condenser microphone. I don't even know if I'm saying those things right, but there are a lot of things. And each thing that was plugged and unplugged, he recorded the result.
Now I go back down the channels just to confirm it wasn't one-offs.
The sound never went away.
Yeah, deal with noise all the time in the studio, and sometimes it's like literally move something in a different direction or click a different button and it goes away or it changes enough. But the noise that we were hearing, it came in different frequency ranges, so it wasn't something you could notch out. It also was random. It comes in constantly, but in random different locations and different times. So it was pretty clear from the start that it was a new issue. As far as like something I hadn't dealt with before, that would be a long journey.
And like all journeys, they had to start somewhere. And that somewhere was Aaron wandering around the house and then the neighborhood with a pair of headphones and a microphone.
Yeah, I kind of like went out, walking up and down the street, trying to see if the sound was getting louder or quieter.
So you had like a little kit with you?
Yeah, I just got like laptop microphone and just like a little audio interface, just to like fully go portable, get away from the house, see if it's the house wiring, is there just something really isolated right here.
To anyone looking, Aaron probably looked like he was partaking in the most embarrassing of professions, that of a podcaster.
The only conclusion was that it didn't go away no matter where I walked, apart from walking further down the street. So we had this weird feeling of like it's something big, and it's coming from a certain direction. And then at the very end of the night, it was a full day of setting the studio up. When I left, it was like 10 or 11 at night, and I got to the end of Leroy's street, and I sent him a photo. There's like a little light pole at the end of the street, and on top of the post, it was like a little cell tower in disguise. We were like, oh, okay, maybe this has got something to do with it.
Could the sound be explained by this tiny cell tower on a pole? It was now 11:30 at night. It all seemed too hard and too complicated to think about.
It was a long day of plugging in a bunch of shit and testing stuff, all the while being like, why am I even doing this? I can't work in here at all. I can't use my speakers. I can't use any of the microphones I need to record the artists I work with. I remember Aaron being like, do you want to line check a couple of things to make sure the patching is correct? And I was like,
oh yeah, you were done.
I was like, I think you should go home. I think I need to like have a mental breakdown on my own for a second and do a bit of mourning.
The good news Leroy didn't know yet, this had nothing to do with that little cell tower on that pole. The bad news, the problem was much, much bigger. The next day, after a bit of Googling, it became pretty obvious to Leroy and Aaron that the little thing on the power pole wasn't strong enough to be causing the kind of interference they were hearing. It was back to square one. More walking around the neighborhood looking like a podcaster. Even worse, a group of podcasters.
It was pretty funny, like in the middle of the night, me and Taylor, my girlfriend, wearing headphones, walking around with this thing down alleyways and in front of people's houses, being like, is that coming from there? It became pretty clear there was this directional line from where my studio is, and then there's like an alleyway over there, and there was like kind of a line, and you could draw it. It looked pretty obvious.
A line of this sound. pointing from Leroy's house to the alleyway, or more specifically, from the alleyway to Leroy's house, which is how I'd found myself in that alley with a guy off Reddit. Chapter 3. Raccoon Cast.
Behind us is this building, and there's this little lip above the building.
Looking up, I could see what Raccoon Cast was talking about. That was a Redditor's guy's screen name, by the way, Raccoon Cast. I could see what he was talking about, but never would have noticed it unless he'd pointed it out to me.
You looked up at that and what you saw, like just the shape, or?
It protrudes past the general building height. It's called a framed box because they're not going to be able to stick the antennas in actual people's rooms, so you just stick them on the roof and then put a wall to hide the antennas.
There's the building, and then there's this weird extra bit of the building sitting on top. It's the same material, the same color, but something about it, it's just off.
Can you check now? Can you have a look? Because I think this could be the building, because the music studio is one block over there.
Just go open Google Maps, look at satellite view, and yeah, sure enough, it's hard to make out here, but those little things are definitely antennas.
Behind what looked like more of the building, it wasn't more of the building. It was a wall hiding some massive cell phone antennas. Not the little box Aaron found on the street lamp, something else entirely.
There's actually a site called Bing Maps, and Bing Maps does their aerial view with helicopters, so it's a little bit sharper. The other thing that I would do, if to extra confirm, is just look up permits for this address. Let's see if I can get Bing Maps on my phone.
After a bit of searching, Raccooncast finds out that the building is a fairly nondescript lawyer's office, but it also comes packing a rather big cell site. I count 6 big fat antenna pads radiating out in one very specific direction: Leroy's house. Raccooncast is one of around 50 cell tower enthusiasts who go around finding and mapping cell towers in the wilds of California, logging them on sites like cellmapper.com.
How many other people are like you in Los Angeles, do you think, mapping this stuff out and gathering this info?
Probably I would estimate like 40 to 50. But most are just kind of novices.
Because I feel like you're in pretty deep.
Yeah, I've been doing this for like 5 years at this point.
And what's the driving point? Because 6 months is a hobby, and then most people get into something and they get bored. You've committed to this.
I think I have some illness because I keep digging into this, keep digging into it. Yeah.
I imagine a lot of people are living next to stuff like this and have no idea, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely the case.
What's one of the most unique places you've seen one of these cell sites hidden?
Some of the really advanced good concealments are deserts and hiding it behind something that looks like cactus but isn't actually cactus. Because cactus is kind of shaped like an antenna, so they can just make some fake cactus and stick an antenna inside of it.
The old fake cactus trick.
The only hidden towers I'd noticed up until now were the ones I'd seen next to the freeway disguised really, really badly as trees. But it turns out there are loads of ways cell companies hide them. Another popular hiding spot? Inside church steeples. Sometimes church steeples are added on later. Just a giant steeple-sized disguise for a big old antenna.
Church steeple cell sites can be very, depending on how much effort they put into it and depending on characteristics of the church, those can be very well hidden. They're all around us, and we drive past them, walk past them, run past them, and they hide very well. And once you start looking, you never stop noticing. Their disguises somehow work until you know what the disguise looks like, and then you spot them everywhere.
If someone's listening to this and they're going, man, I'm curious where these cell towers are, where would you send people to start thinking about this stuff?
That is a really great question, because there are a lot of government agencies that try to keep track of things. The Federal Communications Commission requires that certain towers, if any certain parameters, that you have to register them. But in cities, because they're so small, or because they're so short, or because of whatever, they don't have to be registered. So trying to know where they all are is really difficult. Some countries around the world, they have stricter requirements that you have to be more transparent with information like that. I think even Russia might have some decent level of public data. Los Angeles has city permitting, city planning commission. A lot of documents get made public, but tracking them all and knowing where they all are has taken years and years.
Years and years of work from people like him. People like him who become really handy when people like Leroy buy a house, then wonder why there's a weird noise through all their equipment, that's stopping them from writing hits for pop stars. And with that in mind, I wonder if Raccoon-Cast can tell us who owns this particular hidden cell site.
Since we're at 50, 60 dBm, there's a decent chance that site we were talking about right there is actually T-Mobile.
And how can you tell that?
The RSRP scale is like anywhere from 44 to 120. And anything, the lower the number, the stronger the signal, basically.
Stay tuned for more Flightless Bird. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Flightless Bird is brought to you by Helix Sleep. It's hard to explain how much I love sleeping. There are times I've literally laughed myself to sleep. I'm so excited to be in bed. I laugh and I go to sleep laughing. And Helix Sleep has a lot to do with that. When I got to America, I didn't have a bed. I needed one. Thanks to this show and the sponsorship, I got a mattress, a Helix mattress, and it's really, really great. I'm a side sleeper, a little bit of back, a little bit of tum, but mostly side. But I took the Helix sleep quiz on their website. I got matched with a midnight mattress, and that arrived at my front door. And good God, it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Right now, there's 27% off the entire site. Plus, you can get 2 free Dream pillows with any mattress purchase. There's also a free bedding bundle, which is 2 Dream pillows, a sheet set, and a mattress protector with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. That's the one I would suggest. Just go to helixsleep.com/bird. That's helixsleep.com/bird. As I said, for me, sleep is one of the main things I enjoy in life, which is weird because you're unconscious, but you've got to do the unconscious bit if you want to function really well in the rest of life. So yeah, sleep, we all need it. If you don't do it, you literally die. So yeah, I recommend the Helix Sleep mattress. So go to helixsleep.com/bird. That's helixsleep.com/bird. Flightless Bird is sponsored by BetterHelp. Now, I love the holidays. I love this time of the year. For me, it represents friends and family, and my birthday is on December 25. So, I don't know, I get excited about birthdays. I like having friends over. I like making things all about me just secretly. So, I love the holidays. And it's also all about staying cozy, especially in America where it tends to get cold. In New Zealand, it's summer. In America, it can get freezing. For some, wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate or watching a really good movie like Jurassic Park is the best way to spend the month of December. But I'd also say that therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes to something else completely. I have found therapy really beneficial just to look inward and start to understand my own weird brain a little bit better. I know it can seem a bit overwhelming, the idea of starting, but just talking to a professional can be a really good thing to do. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to whatever your schedule is. You fill in a questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/bird today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/bird. Chapter 4. A Quiet Place. There were a few big wins for Leroy. One was finding that cell site thanks to Raccoon-Cast. The next was finding out whose cell site it was, T-Mobile. With those questions answered, it became clear what needed to be done. That T-Mobile site, it needed to be turned off.
We couldn't know for sure unless we were able to test it, and the only way to test it is to turn it off.
One option was to do some light espionage, but that wasn't on the table. So how do you get a cell carrier to turn off a major cell site?
We somehow found the number. We knew it was a T-Mobile site because it said on the cell tower mapping thing. And then Aaron found the permit for when it was remodeled 2 years ago, the cell tower. We called this woman at T-Mobile who you meant to call if you have complaints about cell towers. And she was like a real punish.
Calling someone a punish or a punisher might be a New Zealand thing, but you probably get what he means. We've all met punishers. They aren't there to help. So Aaron went to the source. He cold called that lawyer's office that also doubled as a cell tower, and the lawyer picked up and sounded about as fed up as Aaron and Leroy did.
He just kept saying, when I bought the building, the lease already existed for the cell towers. I wish they weren't there. 2 things to avoid as an owner: cell towers and billboards. You can just never get rid of them. He's like, all I know is I get a random check in the mail. And I was like, oh, great. Who's the check from then? That's perfect. That'll help us figure out who's in charge of this tower. And he was like, it's just a payment processor. I honestly have no idea. It just kept dead ending so many times over. And then finally he was like, here, try this number. I've got it on a piece of paper. I have no idea who it even is. I just have it written down.
It was late Friday afternoon when Aaron tried the number. No one picked up. So he left a message, assuming it was as good as a dead end.
And so we were like, okay, fuck. But then, lo and behold, on like the next Monday, Aaron got a call.
It was T-Mobile cell site property management. The most helpful person immediately introduced us with an engineer, well, like lead engineer for like Hollywood area or Los Angeles area. That was such a big part of it. Just finding a number at T-Mobile that was not a publicly listed number for some department that's beyond just basic customer service.
They're basically like, this is a functioning cell tower. It powers this whole neighborhood. We can't do this for long, but we're required to test. So it was kind of like getting a sense that they were like hoping that it wasn't them so that they wouldn't have to deal with it. But yeah, they said they were going to turn it to 50% to see if I noticed a difference. But in order to turn it to 50%, they actually had to switch it off because it like locks it or something. And it was pretty crazy, like sitting there with it blasting, you know, like everything's going, you hear the noise, and then all of a sudden it just like goes.
Actually, Leroy recorded the call. Let me just play it.
I'm all up and running if you want to try powering something down. Okay, so which one you're going to start with, the 600? Okay, yeah, that just stopped.
I have to step in as translator here just because New Zealanders don't express excitement like Americans do. The way Leroy just said, that just stopped, that's him very, very excited. He described the moment to me afterwards.
30 seconds of just absolute pure bliss. As soon as we did that test and then they like turned it back to 50 and I was like, okay, so it's at 50% now. It's literally half as loud as it was. Like a lot of my equipment won't be affected at this level. Is there any way to like leave it at this level? And they were of course like, no, this services the whole town. We have to like turn it back right now before we start getting complaints.
Leroy tried one final simple request, one final desperate plea before the noise returned to ruin his life.
And there's no way to like, I don't know how the antennas work, but it seems like the room where my gear is on like a very direct path. If you kind of step a couple of meters one way, you lose it. It dies down a lot. Is there any world where the antennas get shifted slightly or tilted up or anything that would help, but you guys still have full coverage?
You're very close to the side.
Yeah, there's nothing you can really do.
His pleas were ignored.
And I was like, okay, is there any way to like move it or redirection it? Can you make it higher or something? And they were like, your house is too close. It's like your fault. You shouldn't have a house that close to it.
Because they have like a wide, 110 degree sort of spread to each paddle. So it's like
aim it up to fucking space or something.
Yeah. They were like, if you were on the edge, yeah, we could maybe tilt it a little bit. That we could do that for you, but we were like in the exact wrong spot.
This could very easily have been a glass half empty moment, but they took it as a glass half full moment. A glass probably half full of 5G cell phone interference, but nonetheless, a glass half full.
It was really kind of an achievement for us to have figured out. We've confirmed that we'd figure out.
You know, we had these independent testers here coming to survey. Yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a side thing. But they were explaining like FCC regulations in America and how different regions of the world have different exposure level limits for how much antennas are allowed to pump out. And they were using this example of, you know, they were inside Leroy's studio with this big contraption, real-time reading how much, what was it, like microwatts per square meter or something like that. And they were saying, you know, the maximum peak that's allowed in a country like Russia or in other places in Europe is 90,000 of this particular unit. And then as a comparison, they said America's limit is 10 million. So like 10 million to 90,000 as your two different variables of max exposure. Yeah. And I think it's basically FCC's way of being like giving permission to AT&T or T-Mobile to essentially put a cell tower outside your bedroom window, and they're still going to be compliant.
Yeah.
Chapter 5, Stopping the Signal. Okay, so the cell site wasn't moving, the cell site wasn't being turned off, and the cell site wasn't being turned in a different direction. And Leroy had bought the house and set up his studio already, so that wasn't moving either. There had to be another way. I remembered something Raccoon-cast had told me.
For someone like my friend who has a music studio and is trying to stop the signal from coming into the house, do you know how you can block a signal from something like this?
That is not my expertise, but from what I understand, the main thing that studios and companies do is they have these materials that are designed to absorb frequencies, radiation coming in, and it's a very expensive wall, basically.
And a very expensive wall is what Leroy set out to achieve. A daunting task.
So to do a house, basically you need to build what's called a Faraday cage, which is a cage that encompasses the whole thing, and it's all electronically sealed, as in roof, all four walls, floor, all have to be sealed and grounded with a cable. So that's a big job.
When I'd first talked to Leroy about this, months and months ago, he'd started really simply.
I went to Home Depot and bought some corrugated iron and put it up against the wall.
Since then, he's been hard at work. He'd sent me some photos along the way, a lot of ladders, a lot of materials, but I had no idea how it had all gone. So when I went back to visit him 4 months later, I was a little bit nervous. But when I arrived, a musician was leaving. That meant Leroy had been recording. A good sign.
I can't remember if I had done the interior shield yet. I hadn't. Okay, so...
Totally a normal thing to say, the interior shields.
Yeah, it's a multi-shield system now in the house. But basically, this was kind of a test. I have a lot of my gear is all centered in between these two windows, which happen to be in front of the wall that the cell tower directly hits. Right. And I have this big sound panel that covers a lot of the wall. And a lot of my gear is behind the sound panel, kind of directly. So I thought, if doing any kind of shielding is going to work, it'll be a perfect place to test it. So it's about 2 meters by 2 meters. Me and my friend Chelsea took it down, and we just started adding as much copper to it as possible. Right. So there's several different things we use. We had this tape, which is 6 inches thick wide, right. And I can't remember the exact mils that it's thick, but it's
like copper tape.
Yeah, copper tape. So we basically just covered the whole thing in this copper tape, and then I had this RF-proof fabric that some people make clothes with. Right. And it was quite funny because all of the stuff is so easily accessible through the source of people who are more interested in health effects of 5G. But I really thank them because they're so onto it.
What Leroy's basically saying here is that he had tapped into the online community that's really worried about cell towers frying your brain, and he used them to help source the material he'd need to shield his studio.
There's plenty of them, and they've got all sorts of different material you can use, so it's quite handy. It's okay, the tape will be good for this thing, and then fabric will be good for other things that are maybe you need to get in and out of. But yeah, that was step 1, and it was okay, if this works, then we go on to phase 2 of the shield.
And what did phase 2 look like?
It looked like a lot of so much sleepless nights trying to think of how to design something to put on the side of your house that doesn't look horrendous.
It took a long time for him to source the copper he needed, and it wasn't an easy journey.
I wish I recorded the conversation because there's only one place you can get it in America, and the people were punished. They did not want to sell me copper. It was really crazy.
This particular place was used to selling an industrial amount of copper. Leroy needed a lot for his very expensive wall, but not that much. Eventually, he found another source for the copper, and so he got to work constructing an exterior copper wall over the top of his normal wall.
I was just losing so much sleep thinking, am I going to put up this big heavy copper thing and then my house is going to fall over, like, because it's not designed to hold so much weight. It's an old house. It's from 1924. The last bit that was the highest bit, and it was the heaviest bit as well. So all up there, it was touch and go. There's 3 ladders trying to figure out if we were going to get this done or not. And we got it up, and I think it was like, okay, do we test it now? And if it works, we'll be excited. But if it doesn't, we'll be so depressed and have to like go to bed knowing that it didn't work. And then we end up having dinner in here discussing whether we were going to try it or not. It's all sitting there turned off. And then we were like, okay, let's fire it up. And so it was quite a moment. We're all sitting here and we start firing it up and doing the tests, and channel after channel on my console, you can't hear it. You start getting to the worst ones and it's like, oh my God, I can't hear it. And everyone's just getting giddy.
Giddy at hearing what you're about to hear. The enemy of podcasting, but for him, heaven. Dead air. Silence.
I'm a pretty like optimistic, happy-go-lucky guy in general, but this whole experience it's been fairly dark.
Looking back on all this, finding the house, buying the house, finding the sound, Leroy says it's been not great. Home ownership is meant to be this momentous occasion, but for him, this mysterious sound had almost derailed everything.
And, you know, this is my job, and if I don't do my job, I don't have an income, and I can't pay for the house mortgage and stuff like that, so it's all kind of on the line, and it was just all of those emotions coming up at once. Look back at the early days walking around town with headphones and a Zoom recorder in the middle of the night trying to find the sound and where it's coming from, and like he had no idea what it was like or what like journey he was embarking on. A huge achievement, learning how to overcome something that most people have no business in trying to overcome.
Do you find yourself now seeing the world differently, as in you're driving around, you're walking around, and you're just seeing potential cell towers everywhere?
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, you see them everywhere. It's like you see the number 7 and then like you can't stop seeing it, or 27 or something. It's like that. And it's so funny because I'm like with people all the time who don't understand it, and I'm like, oh, check out the cell tower. And they're in the most buzzy places, and it's like quite entertaining, to be honest. You see one in like a church or something, like up in the bell tower, or you see like a fake tree. And a lot of people who know that I'm going through this send them to me as well.
While Leroy was talking, I kept thinking about what this whole episode is sort of about. Hidden cell tower sites. And in putting this episode together, I can sort of see how people have become paranoid about 5G. These invisible signals some people believe are frying our brains or giving us cancer in our testicles. In saying that, that was the crowd that also ended up, in a roundabout way, helping Leroy solve his problem.
It is still fresh stuff that we don't really know how it's interacting with our bodies in any way.
I mean, I also sleep with a Wi-Fi router under my bed.
But I was also reminded of something Raccooncast had said, as I found myself becoming a little paranoid about cell phone signals.
The kind of cool thing about it is the sun is infinitely more dangerous than the cell signals. So the cell signals, there comes a point where they are dangerous. It's a very, very high point, but the sun is infinitely more dangerous. Just standing in the sun for 5 minutes is going to give you way more radiation. The main reason, and / only reason why they're hidden, is to make cities happy and make residents happy, because what you don't know can't hurt you.
And at this point, I should also probably correct a joke I made earlier about a half glass full of 5G water. Getting technical for a moment, the primary interference that caused all this trouble for Leroy was in fact on the 4G band. 5G wasn't even part of the problem. It was just old-fashioned 4G. As for Leroy, his studio's set up and running now with no mysterious sound. It's being either deflected or absorbed, I'm not a scientist, by the giant heavy wall he made of copper. But that's not to say he hasn't entirely escaped the sound. I think back to what Aaron had said at the start of all this.
And then Leroy sent me this recording, and it's like all these horrific memories came back, and I was like, oh no.
That once you hear the sound, once you know the sound, it'll come back to haunt you at some point. Because the sound is always there, somewhere. It's always there because everyone wants their 4G and their 5G and their 5 bars, which means there are always going to be more towers. So doing what he does, There's no truly escaping it for Leroy.
A friend of mine, an artist I work with, was playing the Greek. And I played a song with her and I had an acoustic guitar that was plugged in. And when I was walking on the stage, on the side of the stage, I heard the fucking sound. I heard the exact sound. And the front of house guy was, what's that sound? And I was like, I know fucking exactly what it is. It's coming from that cell tower. I can see it right there. And if I move away from it, it won't pick it up. And he was like, what the hell? That's crazy. Like, why would they have a cell tower causing interference at a concert? And it's obviously not directed at the stage.
It's like a fucking haunting.
I know. It's people need to chill out. Like, we don't need that much internet all the time. Remember when you used to go away like somewhere and you'd have bad cell reception? That was the fucking best. You didn't have to text people back. You could take a break from your phone. Now it's like you go camping and like, or you go for a hike up Griffith and there's cell towers up there. It's crazy.
And I think it's only going to get crazier as time goes on. From what I can tell, this problem is only going to start appearing more and more as networks rely less on big cell towers covering wide areas and install more localized neighborhood towers feeding the high-speed but relatively short-range 5G. Recently, Jamie XX posted a photo on Instagram teasing his new record. And if you look closely, in the background, you can see he has copper mesh sleeves over each one of his studio speakers. It's just speculation on my part, but I'd been hearing a lot about copper over the last few months, and I had a theory about what was probably going on. How did you cope with all those New Zealand accents in the one story?
If it just felt so familiar.
Yeah, so who is that? Who's speaking right now? Is that Dave or someone else?
David's just doing a bunch of voices.
Yeah, I've been working on this for over the last year and just checking in on them, and it has been kind of amazing just seeing like problem solving at play with this impossible problem and just narrowing it down.
I mean, I got PTSD from some of that. I've set up enough studios for podcasting that there is almost always, not to that level that I've dealt with, but like bookshelf dimmer causing interference.
Yeah, right.
Or something not being grounded. And
so it's basically you just going around all the year going like, what is causing this? And just eliminating it as you go.
And like some like running cables through the walls that construction's been done, and hopefully it's not a fucked cable that's in the wall.
Yeah, I feel like
contractors insisting that like, no, that can't be where it's coming from.
I feel like the way I liken this to, remember when like we first got cell phones and you'd have a text coming in near some speakers and you'd hear the text arriving before it beeped, you'd hear it's that, and it's like it feels like once you're aware of that in the air, I can see why people fall down rabbit holes of being like, my brain is being turned to mush because of the signals.
I feel like I've fallen, I'm not to the degree that like 5G
tinfoil over the walls. Yeah.
But like I remember in high school, like having a girlfriend and talking on the phone all the time.
Yeah.
And like once or twice we'd fall asleep on the phone.
And just cell phone there the whole night.
Yes. I still think about that of like, that couldn't have been great for early cell phone to just be next to my brain for that long.
Well, yeah, it's also like Leroy mentioned, you got a router under his bed, that's sending out a really strong signal. I go to sleep listening to a podcast on my phone, and I'll have a phone sitting on my pillow. And so every night I sleep next to a cell phone. And like, we don't know the long-term health effects of this stuff.
I think it's more that I'm not certain that it is, but it's just, I'm not sure that if it was causing it, that cell phone companies would care or had tested it enough.
They wouldn't give a shit.
Yeah.
All they want is their customers to have that coverage. So they're like, we've got 5 bars, get on my network because it's got the best coverage.
Yeah.
I also really resonated. It was good when you'd go somewhere and there was no cell coverage. I went to Rarotonga. It was one of the best holidays of my life a very long time ago. Rosebell was there. We didn't have any coverage and it was like heaven. And if you can't get online, it's like all the anxiety goes and it feels great.
Yeah. There's a couple restaurants we go to where there's like bad or no service when we go there.
Oh, really?
It's nice.
The funny thing, and I didn't mention it in the doc, is that Leroy talked about that big panel that's like inside and a lot of his gear is behind it. There's a window to the side of it. And if you look out that window, you can see directly that lip of that building, which is where those towers are.
So you were walking around and recording near the towers. Were you not getting interference on your recording device?
Okay, good question.
Yeah.
I had a little copper bit of cloth over the Zoom recorder.
And that solved it?
It made it great. It was fine. When I didn't have that, it would be in the sound, which was a trip. So yeah, thank you, online conspiracy crowd who had a lot of that material and sent it to Leroy, which really helped.
Another question.
No technical questions, please.
Not technical. Wouldn't it have been cheaper for him just to move than build inner and outer copper walls?
Good question. In short, no. It was like he'd remodeled that entire back house to be the perfect studio. So he'd spent so much money getting that studio ready. The copper, I think in the end, it was mainly the work that went into it. It would have been like no more than 10 grand to get it finished. So yeah, it was worth doing. And it's that thing of like, once you have a place, it's like,
yeah,
it was
I get
that dream place.
But the fact that it was unusable as a studio.
If they hadn't been able to solve it with the copper, they would have had to move.
Yeah,
because that's his whole job.
Also, property value in LA is pretty solid.
Yeah,
like I feel like he probably could have at least made back his money if he renovated.
It was two things. Yeah. So like his partner Taylor, the house was her like dream remodel job. So it's like the perfect place. So she was in heaven with that house.
So there's more sentimental value.
It was that, and it was like, and just the space was perfect. And they could just afford this place that was like perfect, and so it was worth all the stress. But that idea of not knowing whether it would work, like just the amount of work that went into it, and that pressure of like, is the sound still going to be here?
Like we build this thing and let's flip the switch and see if it's gone.
Just the worst.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. I love a good problem solving story, and I think it was just cool seeing them work through all of those things. And Aaron's from this New Zealand band, The Naked and Famous, and he is just, it's like his brain is somewhere where our brain, I mean, you're sort of similar. You have a good technical brain, but he is just so good at problem solving. And if there's like a mystery, he's like, I will get to the bottom of it.
Turns it on.
And and I think it's just like, once you start thinking about towers, they are everywhere. Like I look at poles now and like light poles, and I never thought about this before, but wrapped around a lot of them, there's a little mini cell site.
Yeah, I mean,
everywhere.
I noticed the tree ones.
Oh, they're comical, right?
Yeah, they look ridiculous. I think there was one time we were driving on the highway and Natalie's never seen them.
Oh, right.
I don't know if she just like didn't notice.
No, it's
them.
like if you don't notice, you don't notice. I think there are a load of people driving around that don't even look.
Yeah.
But once you see them, it's insane how widespread they are.
They're just hiding it purely for cosmetics for the city.
It's aesthetics. Yeah. So it's aesthetics, and it's not to make people paranoid. No one wants to see like a massive cell site out the window. They'd rather just see a little wall. And it's like out of sight, out of mind. And most people don't know because they don't have a big old music studio 1 block across. So you just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I might have one next door to me and I'd have no idea. I have great cell reception in my apartment. Maybe that's why.
I have terrible cell service at our house, so
maybe that's a blessing.
Yeah.
Like less radiation, you know? We'll see who lives longer out of the two of us. I'm older, so it's not looking good for me. But yeah, I'm going to, in the show notes for this episode, I'll put in a bunch of links. And Leroy is working on this big master doc that will basically help anyone having similar problems, like all his problem solving, all his gear, how he fixed it. Yeah. It's become like his whole pet project. He's probably going to write a book on this. All right. Feedback. Quite a few people. And this feedback covers quite a few episodes. A lot of people wrote in that Jimmy Fallon and John Hamm had recreated Creed's With Arms Wide Open, which just backs up my theory that Creed is this cultural force in America that is just, it's not going away.
This is the same Jimmy Fallon, though, that claimed Olive Garden was his favorite restaurant?
It was.
Okay.
I'm not saying good taste, but John Hamm, both dressed up as Scott Stapp, like terrible video aesthetics, like the video, long flowing hair.
This was recent?
Yeah, this was like a week ago.
Wow. Maybe they listened to the podcast.
there's still people writing in about catfishing. Someone said, as a supervisor who reviews applicant resumes, I'm wondering if exaggerating your skills and experience on a resume is considered catfishing. If so, then we're all guilty of it.
I wouldn't count that as catfishing.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, every day we lie about little things.
Yeah.
It's not all catfishing. I think catfishing has to be, you're essentially changing your entire identity.
Yeah, I agree.
We got chastised for our political episode. But this is great, actually. At the end of the show, both of you were discussing the feedback on the election. And while I appreciate your general disgust at Matt Gaetz's nomination, both of you were wrong in how the process works. And this is mainly on me because I was very adamant about this. The president-elect will nominate individuals to positions on their cabinet. However, the Senate must confirm those nominees. Each nominee will go through hearings, face questions from sitting senators, and theoretically be scrutinized on the merits of their answers. Long story short, it's not a slam dunk.
Yeah, but so many people are afraid of standing up against him that
they are. And that's the issue we're facing.
Yes.
But I guess it's not a done deal. There'll be some sort of debate. The question is whether that debate is at all reasonable or whether Trump just gets his way, which is he stacked it so heavily in his favor.
Yeah.
That's the worry.
He has a history of just getting his way with these things.
Yeah. Just surrounding himself with people that love him. Okay, Death Doulas, the feedback's been kind of overwhelming. There were a lot of really personal stories that were emailed in. And so anyone that did that, thank you, because they were all full on and honest and amazing. Read them all. Can't get to all of them, but I selected a few that I wanted to share. Just firstly, a lot of people thought the episode was called Death Doulas when they read it instead of Death Doulas. Kind of like a Spaceman Barry thing.
It was how they read it or how you pronounced it?
No, this was a reading thing. So they saw the title, Death Doulas, and a lot of people read it as Death Doulas. Wow. And they're like, what's Death Doulas? We'll listen to this. I also think it kind of proves like a lot of people hadn't heard of the Death Doula.
I had not prior.
Yeah, so that's kind of neat. There was a problem with when I kept saying about that card game, the Death Deck. People thought I'm saying Death Dick.
Yeah.
Did you catch that?
No, but
when I say deck, it sounds like dick. Like you're probably hearing that now, as in a deck of cards versus a penis.
There's a lot of words that you say that come out a little funny. I try not to.
I appreciate you.
Too much.
I appreciate that. But to clarify, I was saying deck, not dick. We talked about how you didn't want to be obliterated in case your body can be brought back. Quite a few people mentioned something called Frozen Dead Guy Days, which happen in Colorado. This blows my mind. So the Stanley Hotel, which was the inspiration for Stephen King's The Shining, is an actual place. Didn't know that. They have there the Cryonics Museum, which also blows my mind, where they have a guy called Grandpa Brado, who's cryogenically frozen in nitrogen inside an old building on the property. So basically, Stanley Hotel has a guy called Grandpa Brado, and they have a day every year where you go and celebrate him, and you celebrate the idea of being cryogenically frozen. So I'm going to look into this. It sounds like we need to probably go.
I want to reiterate, I was not saying that I wanted to be cryogenically frozen, though, either.
No, you're very adamant. You just don't want to be obliterated.
Yes. Somewhere in between. Somewhere
but
in between.
If you're worried about if they get the technology to bring your body back, don't you want your body in the best condition possible, which would be frozen?
Yeah, I mean, like I said...
They're not going to get your goop out of the ground and be able to do anything with it.
I said it wasn't logical.
You did. To be fair, you did.
Even at the time. And I know it's not logical.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to... Me and Natalie, we're not going to freeze you.
It seems like a waste of resources.
There's that.
And I don't want to end up like Fry in Futurama.
Oh, yeah. Just the head?
No, he was
fell
frozen
into the tank
and then he came back in the future.
Right.
And then...
I always think there's the other thing in Futurama where there's all those heads.
Yeah, the presidents are all heads.
Yeah, that's right. Susie wrote in saying that she threw her grandma a death party that went viral. And I Googled it and it did go viral. It was a big deal at the time. There's a few articles about it. And then the doctor that assisted with her grandma's death did a series of tweets. And I thought those were really interesting. A few hours later, her room was packed with family and friends. It was literally a party. There was talking and laughing and cognac and Dixie cups. The mood was anything but a funeral. They gathered around her bed. I took a group photo. Everyone was smiling. I then watched as a colleague reviewed everything one last time, confirmed her wishes, explained what would happen, and answered everyone's questions. Okay, I'm ready, she said. Her composure was remarkable. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for everything. I love you all. I've been a doctor for 25 years. I've seen enough deaths to know a good one from a bad one. This was, without exaggeration, the best death I have ever witnessed. So that was like basically an old lady threw a party, then was euthanized in a way that was legal in that state, and apparently it was great.
Yeah, how do you feel about assisted suicides?
I'm for it. I feel like they should be available to people. The tricky thing is obviously is when towards the end of people's lives, if like family members are taking advantage of that, or
how consensual
consent.
it is.
It's consent. Yeah, I love the idea of an option, whereas if I'm in huge amount of pain, I should be able to slip off in a way that is dignified and I'm not just in pain for weeks on end.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think I agree. I'm sure there's circumstances or something that we're missing as of why someone would be against it, but yeah, I don't.
Mainly it seems to
consent,
be mainly it seems to be that sort of often a religious thing of like you can't kill, so you can't kill someone. And I guess it's kind of counter to that American idea of like we're going to keep you living without medicine for as long as possible.
Yeah.
But if I'm in pain, put a needle in me. I'm out. Colleen wrote in and said, I was wondering if you guys had ever heard of a death cafe. I thought this could be good for you, Rob. Also, I should say that Natalie texted me and said, I cannot believe you got Rob to do an episode about death. So she is aware of how freaked out you are. Okay, so apparently there's a thing called a death cafe. The basic idea is to gather at an actual cafe and discuss death over tea and coffee. This could be like your new Maru. Cake and cookies. It sets a pleasant social atmosphere that makes the topic less dark and intimidating, and everyone's motivations for going can be different, which makes for some interesting discussion. So it's just like I did that death meditation. That's just like another way to like confront it.
I had coffee with a friend a couple days ago, and her dad does death meditations.
All right.
He like hosts groups for it. She said a lot of it is like terminally ill people going, a lot of older people, but then also just people that have anxiety about death.
The person that ran our workshop was doing one the next day. It seems to be like, it's a thing. And I guess dueling is kind of making it more popular.
Well, I guess if podcasting doesn't work out for us, we can just keep confronting death.
We can. And maybe we can do a different type of death meditation where we just really freak people out. Just make it infinitely worse for them.
It gets real dark about halfway through.
It's going to be bad. Love this from Stella. She said, great episode. Fun fact, if you do happen to be buried alive, the dirt, this is basically how to survive. If you do happen to be buried alive, the dirt should be loosely packed if it's a fresh grave. Cover your face with a shirt or something like that to keep the dirt from getting into your nose and mouth and suffocating you. And try and kick the lid off the coffin. When dirt starts pouring into the coffin, push it towards your feet and try to keep moving upward.
Certain areas of the country, like in Chicago, when my grandpa died, like they couldn't bury him right away because the ground's frozen at certain times of the year. So there was still the funeral and all of that and the gravesite, but they had to wait.
They keep him on ice essentially until then.
I just remember there was like a separate day where they actually dug and put him in.
That's kind of crazy for like a mourning family as well. That's like quite a weird thing, having that stall, because it's like you've got to wait for your closure, right?
Yeah, and then there was this like secondary thing where he then went in the ground.
That's crazy. Amy said, a fellow journalist from Sydney, I was tempted to skip the Death Doula episode. I'm glad I didn't. I was widowed when I was 23 years old when my husband died 3 weeks after our wedding of skin cancer, which had spread to his brain. We knew he was dying when we got married, although we hoped he might defy the odds. Interesting detail, our doctors gave me the choice of whether or not to tell him that he only had a short time to live. This is so full on. Quite the pressure to put on a 20-year-old. I wrote a whole book on this called Wife Interrupted. which was controversial at the time for tackling death and sex, but that's another story. It was such an interesting time. In relation to your conversation about what you would do if you knew you were dying, my partner didn't want to do any huge bucket list things. He didn't really change anything about how he lived or how he chose to view his illness. He lived a big, bold life every day, and in those last few weeks, apart from getting married, we really just continued life as usual. The night before he died, I remember sitting in bed eating lollies and watching Big Brother. Not monumental, but one of my happiest memories. And I just thought that was a pretty incredible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Emily said, I relate so deeply to what Rob said about leaping out of bed and pacing in the night. I'm familiar with that feeling of having no choice but to get up in the night and be completely overtaken by panic. I was a teenager. She had a really religious upbringing and has left those beliefs behind, but it's gotten worse. So she said she related to you pretty intently.
Yeah, it's funny how losing the religious upbringing makes that worse.
Totally. Because our perceived future of eternity just gone.
It's the whole ignorance is bliss thing.
It really is.
Would you rather...
I also think, is that why some people go back to religion, I guess, as well? When they get older and they do just go back to that feeling of I want some kind of hope on more things past death.
Should we consider that in 10 years? We're still doing this?
We can look back.
Let's join a religion again? And
we could. It'd make for a good episode. Yeah. We can decide what one we join. Maybe we become Mormons. That's our Mormon episode, is us signing up. I think we need to check which afterlife is the best for all the different religions and then choose that one.
And which one has the most science and proof?
That's going to be tricky. That's going to be hard.
Well, because Calvin said, no one's ever come back to tell us.
Calvin, by the way, was really perceptive in what he was saying. He kind of blew my mind. He always blows my mind at the end of the episode, but that was
such an interesting one to talk to him about, because we have not talked to him about death yet because he's so young.
Were you worried about bringing it up with him?
A little bit. I was hoping that he had not thought about it too much, had no anxieties about it.
Yeah, he'd been thinking about it.
Apparently, he had been thinking about it. I was hoping it was to be some wacky answer.
No, it was beautiful. It was amazing.
Yeah.
When kids surprise you like that, it's the best thing, because you just assume there's empty space up there, but they're thinking deeply about some really intense stuff.
Yeah, it's like that show from that comedian you really love.
Joe Rogan?
No, Bill Cosby.
Oh my God. Who?
We can cut that.
Why would you do that? For the record, none
Kids
of those
say
men.
The darndest things. Do you know that show?
Not at all. What is that?
It was
also, you are referencing Bill Cosby.
Yeah, it was a Bill Cosby show at some point where he just talked to kids and asked them questions, and
I was unaware of this.
They would tell him insane things. Will you look up really quick? Kids say the darndest things, that it was Bill Cosby that hosted that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was him, all right. Oh my God. Okay, this gets trippy. I went on a rabbit hole with this. Julie wrote in saying, I enjoyed your Death Doulas episode. Another option that you guys didn't discuss is to donate your body to science. Many universities have a body donation program, and it's interesting to think about your body contributing to future developments in medicine. I'm super into that. I think that's a really good thing to do. But I did some Googling because I love using Google.
Mm-hmm.
And I came across this headline: how the body of an Arizona great-grandmother ended up as part of a US Army blast test. I'm just going to read a bit from this article. I'll include this link in the show notes. He had cared for his elderly mother, Doris, throughout her harrowing descent into dementia. In 2013, when she passed away, age 74, he decided to donate her brain to science. He hoped the gift might aid the search for a cure to Alzheimer's. At the nurse's suggestion, the family contacted Biological Resource Center, a local company that brokered the donation of human bodies for research. Within the hour, BRC dispatched a driver to collect Doris. Jim signed a form authorizing medical research on his mother's body. He checked a box prohibiting military, traffic safety, and other non-medical experiments. 10 days later, Jim received his mother's cremated remains. He wasn't told how her body had been used. Records reviewed by Reuters show that BRC workers detached one of Doris's hands for cremation. After sending those ashes back to her son, the company sold and shipped the rest of her body, minus hand, to a taxpayer-funded research project for the US Army. Her brain was never used for Alzheimer's research. Instead, her body became part of an Army experiment to measure damage caused by roadside bombs. Oof. So Reuters has done a whole series about the body broker industry.
So this company made money selling the body and did not pass it along?
Yes. And chopped off a hand so that they would have some ashes.
So, like, purposely deceitful.
Purposely deceitful, absolutely. Got paid for the body by a military institution who then literally blew up grandma.
Threw grenades at her.
It's insane. I don't think I've ever read anything so American, because it's like the melding of the military and commerce and capitalism, and my mind's blowing.
So, still want to donate your body to science?
Less so after reading that.
Yeah.
I don't mind what happens to me. I don't want to be used to like further like making a bomb better. I don't want my body to be used to like show how to blow up a body better.
Yeah.
Horrific. So yeah, less so.
Well, you got to make sure you're vetting whatever company you're selling your body to.
Kate wrote from Honolulu, I don't have much to say other than sing the praises of Death Doulas hospice care workers. I lost my mum 3 years ago. She was a week from her 49th birthday. They not only had to take care of her, but my dad and us kids. They were fantastic and deserve more pay. And this is the clincher that I really enjoy. As opposed to the priest who administered my mum's last rites, who is so bad that my dad wrote an angry Yelp review on the parish's page. That's now the top rated review to this day. Which is just really good. We talked a bit about locked-in syndrome in the Death Doula episode. C wrote in saying, my father passed away from a stroke that caused locked-in syndrome 2 years ago. I hope the episode helps people even scared to write a will to tell people what to do. Because the worst feeling is making decisions for a conscious but not body conscious being. So that's something to think about and another reason to work on a will. I was touched, said Emma, by... They've written your name Wob, which just always annoys me. It's Rob, but you're stuck with it.
Yeah, you need to make sure you're reading it, though.
It's like when you call me Davey. I get the same response when I think of you as Wob or Wobby. I was touched by Rob's answer to reliving his best day and found myself feeling very grateful that I too get to live my best days with my kids and my husband. I know looking back on these days as fond memories is not far away as I'd hope. As a dedicated listener, I've also liked and subscribed. Thank you, Emma. Okay, there's so many. I'm just going to do one more. Thanks to everyone, again, who wrote to flightlessbirdchat@gmail.com. All the emails are pretty incredible. I'm going to end on Emily. She said, I believe my acceptance comes from my time working as an emergency vet tech. I dealt with loss and death on a daily basis. It was compassionate and there was so much love surrounded death in the field. Letting my own pets go gave me perspective. Death is not something to be feared, but something to embrace as the gift it is. I'm not going to go that far, is what Emily said, but I do like her attitude, and I like the idea of like being around a lot of animals and them passing away helped her get past any kind of fear.
Well, and I think we can strive for finding ourselves closer to that.
Completely. That's the
attitude.
Aim. I think the aim is for us to freak ourselves out less somehow.
Yeah. And is that just by misdirect, probably?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Distractions. So yeah, thanks for all that feedback. It's really fun reading what you have to say. And to anyone watching on YouTube, thanks for watching, wherever you're listening. Tell your friends. We'll be back next week with a new topic.